Great to welcome into the show now our good friend and colleague, Mauricio Pedroza. You can see him 5 days a week on ESPN Deportes. We're alongside with Herculez Gomez. He hosts Ahora Nunca. Mau, great to have you with us on the show. Let's dive right in here. Who do you think bears the primary responsibility for the first leg defeat in Honduras? Many people in the Mexican press are signaling Jaime Lozano.
Great to see you guys. Great to be here. It all starts and ends with the manager, usually. And that's how we like to break down games like that. I don't think that's the case. Regardless of who would have coached this team, with the individual performances that we saw, maybe the end result would have been the same. So I am going to blame the players in general. It's hard just to single out someone, but I was very, very disappointed with the way the team handled himself. And you could hear from Edson Alvarez, one of the few players that spoke after the game, and I thought he was very candid with his quotes saying, listen, we lacked personality, and it started with me. And it should start with him, because Edson Alvarez, maybe it is the heart and soul of this team, and his performance, technically, tactically, was very subpar. And yes, the rest of the team was pretty much the same. So we've been through this many times. I feel like every time I come on the show is to find someone responsible for a very poor performance from the Mexican national team. Though this time, I feel like even if it was Gerardo Martino, Diego Coca, Jaime Lozano, Jose Mourinho, whoever, the performance would have been the same, because the players are on a very concerning low level.
Yeah. Listen, a year ago, it's been a year and you've had 3 coaches, right? Tata Martino, Diego Coca, now Jaime Lozano. And the reason you're at Jaime Lozano right now is because the players wanted it that way. They convinced the media, they convinced the federation, they convinced the powers that be that Jaime Lozano is the man, the one who's going to take them to that next level. So if he's the man, then you have to prove it. You have to defend him. I'm not going to sit here and tell you Jaime Lozano is the main culprit here. He's the one to blame, because the one constant out of all these coaches are the players. The ones who didn't give that personality, who didn't go out there with that fire in their belly, were the players. The ones who didn't muster a shot on goal were the players. The ones who let a team that was in their worst generation, like Honduras, decide we're going to take you out of San Pedro Sula, where the conditions are hot, humid, the grass is up to your knees, it's heavy, it's intimidating, it's hostile.
Tegucigalpa was no 5-star resort, buddy. That was pretty hostile too, huh?
No. Did you see that field? It was pristine. And why did it take them there? Because they wanted to play football against Mexico, because they believed in their brand. Luis Palma, El Choco Lozano, those Honduran players dominated Mexico for 90 minutes, and that's on the players. There are many issues that Mau and I can sit here and you, Seb, talking to. We're blue in the face about the federation and what's deep in the root of the problem of the Mexican football, et cetera, et cetera. But that game, that performance, that's on the players.
Okay, look, there are some things not to like about Jaime Lozano, for sure. In this game specifically, I thought he froze a little bit, right? There was never a change philosophically in what Mexico was trying to do. Honduras was clearly doing something right from the very beginning of that game. 5 minutes in, you could tell things were going wrong for Mexico. They never really changed until the end, when you're throwing everything forward. And that's not a tactical change. That's just desperation. So beyond that, even the subs that he does make, and he only made 1 at half, he probably could have made 3 or 4, and it would have been justified. The 3 subs he made in the second half, none of them made a difference. I mean, Mexico was closer to giving up a third at the end of this game than they were to scoring the first. To Herc's point about being dominated, that's not an exaggeration. This was a terrible performance from Mexico, who had almost 65% possession and mustered 2 shots on goal.
Yeah, where did they have that possession, though?
Yeah, no, it's fair, but to have that much of the ball and not be able to create anything it is devastating for me. And Mau, I'm surprised that you can't pick players, that you can't name players. Because to me,
I mean, I can.
To me, what's most frustrating is that it's the guys with the biggest names that are playing the worst. They're not showing up and not helping the national team. They're actively hurting the national team. Edson Alvarez, the guy you're talking about, he's a Premier League starter. And he and Jorge Sanchez, who's played for Ajax and Porto, get beat 2-on-1 in the corner on the second goal by a guy who's playing for Olimpia. What's going on? Santiago Jimenez scores 13 goals in the Dutch league, scores a brace in his first ever Champions League game, can't control the ball against Honduras. I mean, Cesar Montes, I don't know what. Everybody wants to talk about Honduras' great goal. Cesar Montes was ole on that defense.
Yeah, he was lost.
The best players from Mexico are playing very, very badly now. The biggest names.
But here's why I did not want to give you a name. It's easier to try to find one player that actually performed well, right? So because we can go spot this position by position. And
what does performing well in a 2-0 loss where you get killed matter?
I mean, but that's exactly the problem. It's not only that Honduras clearly dominated Mexico. They wanted it more. I'm fine. This is a sport, and this is a competition. You go out, you compete, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But at least you try. And I did not see that effort from the players. And the most disappointing part is this, at least to me. A month ago, we saw Mexico play Germany, and we said, yes, this is it. We found it. This is the best performance we have seen from a Mexican national team in a long, long time. Against a very poor version of Germany, right? But still Germany.
And a draw.
And some of the players playing at the top, but some players, right, playing at top teams in the world. And now you go from that, right? You go from saying, whoa, we found our manager, we found our players, to what the hell is going on? So this is the part that I go and say, as a manager, you need to have your players, same attitude, same performance, same commitment. If it's Germany, if it's Honduras, if it's Belize, if it's Brazil, if it's Argentina, or if it's El Salvador. And we did not see that. So that's on the manager, but it's also the players. Because, Herc, and correct me if I'm wrong, you don't need a manager to tell you what involves, what entitles to play representing your country. Yeah. If you need a manager for that, then the sport is not for you. Yeah. And that's what the players showed on Friday night.
The reason I'm okay with Mao not naming players, because you would name players if there's a silver lining, if there are players who had good outings. I don't think there was one player that you could say had a good outing, top to bottom, who came in or who started. Not even the second goalkeeper, as producer Beto's whispering in my ear, which is true. That's the reality. There are no silver linings in this game. This is as bad as it can get for the Mexican national team. Maybe the only silver lining was that Honduras did not score that third goal. There are away goals in this competition. Yes. So you have to think about that now heading to the next game.
Producer Beto whispering in your ear. It's like the Valentine's Day show here on Fútbol Américas. All right, so one of the very negatives from the game against Honduras, the first leg, is, of course, the injury to Memo Ochoa. Given that factor, Mao, how confident are you that Mexico can get the result they need tomorrow night in Azteca and advance? And if they don't advance, does it mean the end for Jaime Lozano?
It shouldn't, but it probably will. Let's just remind everybody that even if Mexico does not make it against Honduras, there's still another repechaje, another shot at Mexico, for Mexico to qualify for Copa America. So let's remember just one thing. The one scenario in which a manager, Mexican national team manager, is in the hot seat if the business is compromised. The business of Copa America is huge for the Mexican national team and for the Mexican Soccer Federation. So if that's compromised, then Jaime Lozano will definitely be sitting in that hot seat. Now, that's not ideal, because if we're gonna go from manager to manager, to have 4 managers in the span of 1 year, then what are we doing here? Who's in charge of making the decisions? Because if this happens, this is just a reflection on those decision makers. If you have to constantly change managers, that means that you're not qualified, you're not competent to decide who should be the head coach of the Mexican national team. So I want to believe Jaime Lozano will be there for the long run, but experience tells us the opposite. If things go south against Honduras, he will absolutely be in the hot seat.
Mau, what do you think happens on Tuesday night? You think Mexico can turn this around? Do you have any confidence after what we saw?
Honestly, I don't. I think it's just, right, so this is desperate times, desperate measures. Players are going to face that game with a different attitude, I hope. But here's my biggest concern. It is Estadio Azteca. And we know that that doesn't necessarily mean a home field advantage for the Mexican national team, because the fans can turn on the players real fast. And if the performance is not there, I don't want to name the you-know-what if after a goal kick or whatever, but the fans are going to turn on the players. And Hector Herrera said it clearly a year and a half ago, right? When that happens, we don't feel like we're playing in front of our home fans. So, no, I'm not confident. I'm not confident that Mexico can win 3-0, 4-1, and qualify directly. This looks like if things go really well for the Mexican national team, it's a 2-0, then you go to extra time, penalty kicks, and just I'll get on my knees and pray, because I have zero confidence in this team right now.
How can you have confidence in them because of a friendly in which you drew? You didn't win against Germany. This Germany, by the way, who lost another friendly to Turkey at home just recently. You know, they did beat the U.S., but we're not talking about the U.S. We're talking about Germany and the game they feel good against, okay, or good about. You have a Mexican national team right now that has shown us they cannot defend. And you want them to go out and not only score multiple goals, 3, but not concede a goal. Because 1 goal would mean that Mexico needs to score 4. And in case they don't get out of that, they then have to go play the loser of the series between Panama and Costa Rica. I would have said before all this started that if we did a power ranking, Honduras would have been worse than the 2 I just mentioned in Panama and Costa Rica. How can you possibly feel good about this scenario? The business, oh yeah, that's being touched. That's being troubled. The wallet. I'm not saying it's over for Mexico, because we just saw the U.S. tonight versus Trinidad, and anything can happen. And I think at home, when they're at their best, there are a few better home teams in this region. That's a reality. But it's pretty close to being over. And if that happens, if they have to go into that playoff game with the Costa Rica, with the Panama, I cannot begin to tell you the heads that will roll.
Yeah, it was it's going to be a one-off game if it comes to that in March in Frisco, Texas. Could you imagine 90 minutes for a spot in Copa America
Football
for Mexico?
America's live from Frisco,
and
Texas. There you go.
And it's in the States. Advantage Mexico.
Quickly, Mal, before we let you go, because we know a little bit about kind of rock bottom here in the United States. We're doing a post-game show after a game in Trinidad, after all. What would the fan reaction be? What would the media reaction be if it came to the fact that Mexico were to miss Copa America 2024? Because with no qualifying for 2026, I mean, I don't think you cannot put a value big enough on what Copa America is to the Mexican national team.
No, absolutely. That's the biggest tournament in the next 3 years for the Mexican national team, both sports-wise, business-wise. I thought we had hit rock bottom a year ago after being eliminated in group stage at the World Cup in Qatar. This would be a new low. And if things went like they did after that World Cup in Qatar, I will warn the people handling the communications department for the Mexican National Federation. Now they are in this crusade against fake news and fake comments. Winter is coming. Winter is coming. And you ain't ready. You ain't ready.
Oh, and of course it's going to be Honduras that brings about the winter. I can just see it. Albert Ellis, you know, like on a counter at Azteca, getting that 1 goal.
Who's Jon Snow? Chino Huerta?
Suddenly, there you go. Yeah. Suddenly, that's a good shot. That's a good shot.
I can tell you that. Little finger right here. There you go.
There he is. Mauricio Pedroza, catch him 5 days a week over on Deportes with Herculez Gomez on Ahora o Nunca. Mau, as always, great to have you with us.